This is the international welcome. Um, Hi, how was your week? Guess what? Everything's working. This is great. Let's see. We got anybody here? Two people. Say hi, everybody. Come and say hello. Um, let's see what we're gonna do today. Don't know if this is gonna. Um, okay, so looks like it's just going to be me talking to myself again for goodness knows how long. That's okay. Let's maybe try and get the word out a little bit more. So I know Fridays are a little bit of a tricky day because it's busy. Ah, it's Jigger. I'm really sorry. I don't know how to pronounce your name. If you can spell it out phonetically, I will do my best to pronounce it correctly. But I really appreciate your being here and supporting. Thank you. Um, let's see if we can get a few more people to come and join. I'm just going to put a message out on Mastodon. Going to start porting my open banking prototype to Laravel. Come join. Let's go. Bang. Right. So that it's not just me silently tweeting, trying to get people to come onto the show. We'll get onto something interesting. So I think let's talk about final. Oh dear. Maybe I shouldn't actually. Um, well, I will. One thing that I think was really good. I watched Nuno Maduro's stream. I think it was from Wednesday, earlier this week, um, where he was talking about final, and it it was very good. I think it was very measured. Um, Obviously, he had quite a few people on stream, which is nice, and he was able to kind of run a poll and see the feedback. I guess mostly his audience is Laravel focused, and there might be a little bit of a bias there towards maybe some of what it feels like potentially the majority of the Laravel community are in agreement with. Final is not something you should use very often. Let's put it that way. And so, yeah, that maybe came across as a bit one-sided, but I think overall his discussion and his working through like what is final, when should you use it, when can you use it, when is it good, and when is it not so great, was very reasonable and measured. So that was cool. Um, I've seen quite a lot of back and forth in the interwebs about it, and yeah, I don't know. What do you think about it? Do you have any feelings on Final? Do you use Final? I would love to know because I've hardly used it ever. Um, I've never felt the need. I don't have loads of open source packages. I've got one that's reasonably popular, and I don't use Final in that, I don't think. In fact, we could go and have a look. But I've never felt the pain that people are expressing, the need to um, use Final, but then I'm not creating these sort of low-level packages that are installed in millions and millions of applications. So I can't really weigh in on it. I do think it's interesting some of the arguments for and against. Um, Again, I'm just really disappointed that a lot of those get into you know mud slinging um, at people, you know, rather than focusing on the topic, um, which is a shame because hey, we're better than that. We're 21st century human beings. We should know better. But also because I was saying to somebody yesterday, whatever language it is, whatever ecosystem you're in, whatever drama is happening this week, it's inconsequential and insignificant. There are so many important things happening in the world, big, good things and not so good things. Um, our little bubble of software is really quite insignificant. And I know some people will have arguments to say that it isn't for various reasons, and you might be right, but really, in the grand scheme of things, software can come and go in the billions of years that the universe has been around and will ever be around. Yeah, it's just I know it's right here, right now, but get over yourselves. I don't think it's a big deal. Um, yeah, I'm not going to say any more about that because everybody's heard enough. I'm probably sick of it. So let's stop on that one. Let's move on. What I thought yesterday would be quite interesting, and I don't know if anybody's doing this. I haven't really looked, so I'm just going to say it. Um, is like a news show, but not a podcast, like a live stream that's maybe at a set time every day or every week. And yeah, I don't know. Sort of like a quick roundup, maybe 15 minutes. What's going on this week? I'm obviously not going to be a good news reader. I'm not suggesting that I do it, but it feels like something that hasn't really been tackled in the space, in the community of Laravel, of PHP. Yeah, there are people doing videos, pre-recorded things, and what have you. But I really like Brent's PHP annotated. Um, it might be quite nice to do that live and do almost like a news desk style 15-minute show. I don't know. What do you think? Let's see. Uh, Jigger, you said, I don't use Final, but I also don't maintain a lot of package. My opinions will hardly matter. I'm with you, bro. This is this is what it's like, isn't it? We can't weigh in too much. I think I try and look at it as being pragmatic at the end of the day. Just try to have an open mind and kind of um, not go to the extremes. Um, yeah, like the always use final, which I don't think anyone's ever actually said that. Maybe some people do, but that's definitely wrong. And then never use final. No, yeah, I don't know either. But just avoid the extremes and maybe there'll be less drama. But people seem to like, I've got an opinion, therefore I should take that opinion to the extreme, and then hey, presto, drama. Okay. The next thing that I have on my list is Ash Allen released his new book. What was it called? I should have written this down properly. I'm just going to look up the title so I can get it right. Oh, come on, internet being really slow. Consuming APIs in Laravel. Um, and I just on Tuesday, I think, when he released this, I finished reading his first book, Battle Ready Laravel, which was very good. It's direct, it's short, um, it's an easy read. There's a lot of really good stuff there if you're a Laravel engineer. There were certainly things that I not thought about, which was great. So I've learned some new things, and I've made loads of notes in the book, and I'm going to come back to, and I might share more about those as time goes on because that it's really interesting. Um, and so I think you should go and get that book if you've not read it already. And you should get his new one, Consuming APIs in Laravel, because that looks to be really good as well. And apparently it is very good. I haven't got it yet, and I would like to. I've got quite a few books on APIs. You won't be able to see them, but a few years ago, I bought the whole kind of library of how to do REST in Web 2 and blah, blah, blah. How to do, what was Phil Sturgeon's? My memory's terrible. I don't uh, remember. APIs You Won't Hate. Yeah, that was a very good book. At the time, especially when I was kind of building a big API for the company that I was working for, it was essentially kind of framed my thinking around how APIs should be built, helped me come to some conclusions, and I'm kind of hoping that consuming APIs in Laravel will do something similar. I know already that it touches on using Saloon, which I think is actually a really good library um, by Sam Carey, and yeah, I think it will just open up again some more like little hidden gems that I've not thought about with how to consume APIs using in my Laravel apps. So I'm looking forward to reading that one. I've got a discount code for Battle Ready Laravel, which Ash sent to me, and I'll share that and in the show notes. Oh gosh, show notes. I'll share that in the YouTube description after this. And yeah, I think you should get both of his books because if you get them together, you get a nice little discount overall. Um, anyway, then what else? So this week I said I was going to create. I'm going to move um, my project over to Laravel. So let's see that. My project, which was the open banking thing. So I think we can get underway because I haven't got anything else to talk about right now. Okay. Looks like I've been. I don't know what that is. Right. Get rid of that. What's this? So let's switch to this view. Okay. Here I am. Right, yeah, I finally learned to clean everything up before I start doing this. So I've got my project here and I want to set up a new one. So I'm just going to do, I'm going to keep it basic for now. I know maybe I should make some decisions around this and how it might be used in terms of should I use a starter kit or whatever, but I'm not going to do that. I actually need to check if I've got quite a few projects called Spread because it was just a working name, so I need to just tidy that up. In fact, do you know what? I'm going to go with the Jetstream one, and I'm going to do Livewire, just because I don't need to think about that later. I'm going to do, yeah, let's have API support, dark mode, email verification, and team support. Why? Well, because I don't know where this particular app is necessarily going to go, and having all of that optional stuff, whilst it might not be necessary at this stage, leaves the door open to some potential. Jugas said he's had to leave. No worries. When you're watching this back, I'm sorry that I missed your message, and I hope you have a great, I guess, evening. Thanks for joining for the first bit. Would you like to initialize a Git repository? Yeah, let's do that. I love prompts. I think this is so nice. I'm so glad that this exists. And if you're seeing any of what's happening on Twitter at the moment with regard to some of this stuff, there's quite a few people showing interest. Joe Tannenbaum, who I met at Laracon US, has been doing some really good stuff with this. I like it a lot. I'm excited. I'm just gonna, I think my line height makes this look worse than it should. Is this the one? It says default. It's very boring, isn't it? Yeah, so if I took my line spacing down, that looks normal again, kind of. Which is okay, but it's a bit squashed for me. I like to breathe. So I don't mind the little gaps. I think just the interactivity in prompts is really cool. Anyway, I'm waffling about that. Which database? Oh, let's see even more prompts. This is beautiful. I'm going to go with MySQL. So I've got that set up. Okay, let's go with that. And then what we'll do is we'll boot this up somehow, somewhere. That is not what I wanted. Why did I leave that open? That's going to be really annoying. That's really annoying as well. Why are you remembering everything? I don't want all of my things. Oh, too many. So, let's see. Should be able to go to. Oh. I've probably not put this in the right place, have I? Jumped straight in, and I've put it in the wrong folder. It needs to go in my projects folder. That's where my herb looks at. So I need to move spread to projects. Now it'll work. Unknown database. Let's create that then. New spread. Fine. So this didn't, it can't migrate because it doesn't know. So I need to do that. Oh, I move, but I don't go. I am not very good at this, as you can see. Right, so we've got the basics of our app. We can do registration and login, and all of that stuff can come later. Right, but quick recap then. So we've got a brand new application. In fact, I'm going to PHP Storm. No, I'm in Spread, so I need to do that. I want to, where did we get to? We got to this place where this hodgepodge of PHP scripts is being used to take payments. And I want to tidy that up and turn it into something nicer. I don't know what it should be yet exactly. I don't know what the product is here. I think there's quite a few things that it could be, but I think we'll kind of start at the bottom and work our way up, because I think the payments is the sort of fundamental piece which we've proven out, and then the layers on top of that are going to be like, how does somebody get set up properly and are able to basically know what payments that have been received without necessarily checking everywhere, and maybe keep some oversight of what's going on. They might want to understand who their customers are or something like that. Yeah, you know, those kinds of things that maybe the open banking service that I'm using doesn't do out of the box and maybe isn't planning to do. So something that adds some value there. I kind of want to try like really small transaction. In fact, we should do that. I wonder if I can do that. But we'll maybe come on to that, because the goal today is to just kind of move what we've done and put it into a Laravel setup. So let's give that a go. Now, question is, where did I put all of that stuff? Here. Oh. Sorry if you can hear the dog. It's being very noisy today. Right, so we've got some of the basic payment logic happens here, and this is gross. So I don't really want to be doing things this way. That's nasty. I want it to be a bit more robust than this, testable, etc. We've got configuration in here. Oh dear, I didn't want you to see any of that, but there you go. I'm gonna have to recycle some of those, delete that clip. And what else? Yeah, actually, maybe let's just focus on bringing that sort of super basic payment flow out. So I'm not worried about the UI. I just want to handle the action of creating that link and taking the user through it, through the flow. For now, in Laravel. So I'm just going to take my Trello class. Hi. It's a bit too small for me. Hopefully this is of a size that you can read on whatever device you're using. I'm going to just create it as a service. I'm just going to call it Trello. Stick that in there for now. This isn't nice at all because of the way that I sort of hastily threw this together. So we can go through this and kind of make it better. And it'll be good, actually, with what I was talking about with APIs, to maybe start looking at how we can do a GraphQL client using Saloon or something. So we'll come to that in a second. But then the other kind of main bit here is, let's say we've got route to, I don't know what this is going to be yet, but maybe pay. I don't want this to be here. I want it to be in a controller. So I'm going to say payment controller. That's what I want it to be. At the moment, I don't know enough about the problem, and I'm really diving in way too quickly. I guess we could stop and sort of think about it and kind of plan it out a little bit more, but I like to find the edges of what I'm doing first, and then kind of work my way into the middle, or maybe jump into the middle, and then kind of work back out towards that in a tidy fashion. So I kind of know that this create payment script was a like pay, and the pay, it really creates this link which we redirect the user to, and that shows them a QR code that they could scan, ideally with their phone, and then they follow a flow through that eventually returns them back, hopefully, to my service, and then I can do something like confirming that a payment was taken and checking it and all of that kind of thing, which is stuff that we didn't actually do, but we can do. So we should explore some of that. What else have we got? So I do just want to then start thinking about, well, what data should I be capturing? I did a little bit of thinking about this when I started this project back in December or January. But I think actually that needs to be refined a little bit more. I don't really have a kind of go-to tool to do database structure, architecture stuff. There's a few things that I've used that are okay for it, but does anybody have something that they recommend? I mean, mine would be Miro, or maybe even the MySQL Workbench has got a built-in visualization tool, which is okay. It's a bit, but I don't know. Let me see what I've got elsewhere. Maybe that's not even the thing I should be worried about at this stage. So, like, if I jump back to this for a second, actually, if we just go, I want to create this controller, I just want to hit that endpoint. Maybe it should be a post, actually, because probably going to be passing some, not super sensitive, but data that I want to not just make available in that way. maybe it's going to become more complicated. And you know, like I don't want to just pass parameters in the URL. I want it's a creation action, so I want it to be a post. Yeah. And I need to create that controller. So no. Oh, oh, well, that's just silly, isn't it? Because I'm trying to run before I can walk. And then everyone will be questioning, wait, does he do Laravel in his day job? Because he doesn't know what he's doing. And the answer is, yes, I do. But I don't pay attention to the order that I need to do these things in. Because it doesn't happen all that often. Anyway, so payment controller, and I am just going to make this as an invokable. For now. I want to talk about this because actually I think that invokable is an interesting pattern in certain circumstances. But I've seen quite a few people using it in very generic ways, you know, like in circumstances that don't really call for it. I don't want to go off too far on a tangent with this, so I'm going to be brief. But basically, if I'm creating a class and I'm making it, it's just a single method, and that method is invoke, and it's not doing anything except running code in that function. Like it's not resolving anything out of the container and being injected in the parameters of the method, you know. So if I was to say, let's get the application here. Right, so I can do this should work. That's no, it won't because I need to, let's just pop this back. In fact, I'm going to do all. Does it have all anymore? Oh, maybe it doesn't. Any. It's not all, it was any. So there, the application gets injected. Fine. And I can really, yeah, but if I haven't got anything that I'm injecting, and I'm just doing, yeah, that's, thanks Copilot. Say I'm just imperatively doing a bunch of stuff. Why would I use an invoke method for that? Just to encapsulate it into a controller? This is a lot of boilerplate just to have a single method that can be used in this way. Now, maybe it makes sense for a controller because maybe you have to pass it a class, and there's no way here that I can pass it something else. Let's say, but you know what? Let's just try something. Let's get rid of this. I'm just going to call this a function. We're going to call it get payment link. This should basically behave exactly the same. Right, and I know it's in controllers namespace, but here I'm going to do well, that's actually kind of interesting. How does it do that? I don't know. It's not a class. This is a app HTTP controllers. Doesn't know where it is. Well, let's do it as control. What's that warning me about? Oh, okay. Yeah, because there's no such thing. That's, well, I'm going off down a weird, what the heck am I doing? How do I define a function in a namespace and reference it? I have to load that file somehow. I can't just. So I can maybe use function. That doesn't work. That does somehow resolve. I don't know. The IDE kind of knows where to find it, but well, let's just see. I'm going to keep this, try and keep it simple. This is silly. I've gone too far down a tangent. Yeah, there's no way that that can know where that is. But that's just because it's in this file, and there's nothing really intentionally loading this. But the IDE is just going, I think I know where that is. I know what you mean. If I include, no, that's not what I want, but it's close. Payment controller, and then do that. Really? Seriously? Relative to where? Yes. Okay. So I could figure this out. I'm just, yeah, I'm stabbing, and this is silly and it's not right. But my point, hopefully, will become clear now, is that this method, this invoke method that I'd created, it doesn't need to be an invoke method. It could just be a function. It's almost entirely identical to what I would do here. And in fact, what might be kind of interesting, I wonder if it would do that. This isn't, I don't think I can do this really. That's not correct because I don't want to call the method here. I want it to be called when the root gets accessed, not when the route file is processed, parsed. So it should be something like this. And you know what? Then I can do all of that lovely stuff, which I've moved it to the routes file. Routes? Why did I say routes? I'm British. It's roots. And then I can pass in my dependencies there. And yeah, that's not very nice either, really, because I can't just type in the dependencies on the place where I want them. So don't do this. Basically, don't do this. But there's some version of it here where I can potentially just refer to this function rather than, because we know that this will take a callable. So how do we do first class callable here? Isn't it dot dot dot? No. What's the first class callable logic? Ah, it's dot 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 in here. Right, so this now will be treated as a callback, basically, a named callback, right? It's kind of weird that it doesn't know. Well, let's see what happens. Oh, that's silly. That's really dumb. yeah, but it still knows, right? And then we could do a PHP artisan, right? This is what happens to me. I get super distracted. Uh, that that's weird. That doesn't really make sense. Right. That's going to make sense to somebody. There's something around this definition of that location. Right. So what we can see is the roots here. If that was a function call, this is going to fail, right? Because it's dumping out. But when it's a callable, when I make this first class callable, it's not calling it. It's just passing the function into the root definition, which is kind of why you don't do, new controller uh, and then the method, right? Because that's you're instantiating there, and that would be wrong. That's really poor behavior. And in fact, maybe you can do it this way now with first class callables. I don't know if they can be used like that, but even that's still kind of a bit too much. Going back to my original point is if you're using invoke, you technically can just make a function. And because I'm now passing this function as the root parameter, it should be able to resolve out of the container exactly the same. Yeah, it does. Oh, no, that still works. And this one should still work. Oh, yeah, okay. In that context, it's a different path because for some reason, console operates differently. But fine. So weird. I don't know why that is. But this is really interesting because now I've got much less boilerplate and I can get rid of. Basically, I just want like a. If I want root actions, I can still have them well named. It doesn't need to be a class that then goes off and uses invoke and only does one thing. It can be this file of functions of all related, like get payment details. So I don't know what it is. And there, that's my controller. That's a controller. So yeah, I don't know. This is the that even says you don't need invoke at all. I know it's a nice pattern that people are used to and familiar with, and it makes some sense. But honestly, if invoke is the only method that you've got in your class, it just feels really weird to me to write that much boilerplate for it. I think you can save yourself some. I know it's not a lot because it's there are generators and things building those, but maybe there's something here. Maybe I should explore that. I don't know. What do you think? Should we do root controllers as just function calls? We can, and we can type in them. I might tweet about that and see what people think later on. That's kind of interesting. But I'm gonna revert to how it should be. Should. I am going to do it as an invokable, so that I can just do that. Yeah, this we'd figure out a way to kind of get rid of that nonsense too. So this was simpler. I find that kind of interesting. It's not payments, it's payment. Okay, goodbye. bring this back. I should have just undone, but Control Z is your friend. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other things I'm missing about that, and I'm, don't just do what I've done just because it looks cool or different. I don't think it's cool. We should think about that a little bit more before we start rewriting the universe. It's an interesting exploration for a few minutes. Right, so this is going to say app Trello not found. Well, that's because it's not app Trello, it's app services Trello. And it's still not going to be found, but we can make it be found. Okay, so we've got our Trello thing, we've got some of our logic coming in thanks to Copilot. Let's see. Is it even the right stuff to do? We'll work from the top. So that's just rubbish, but there's something else. This is the first bit. So the service is instantiated with some credentials. I don't want to be doing that in my controller, this bit here. I want to be doing this in the service container. So I'm going to move this into my, for now I'm going to put it in the app service provider. And then I can go, I just want my Trello client. I'll call that Trello. That's what I want. We can move this into a different service provider at some point. And you know what? I can never remember where I should put this. This app. Oh. Let's do it here and see what happens. This should be interface, really. So that I can swap it out with some mockable thing. And I think that's what we'll get to when we start looking at Saloon. But for now, I'm actually just going to return this back to what it was. I'm going to import this. So we know that we need that stuff from our end. Oh, look at all those lovely special things. She'll get rid of that in a bit. We can get rid of that now. That's the wrong one. Put these down here. Services Trello. All right, so we haven't got that config yet either. So somewhat similar to this, although much nicer. And this is why we like Laravel. Let's go to config, services. I should be using my keyboard to navigate through my code, but for some reason my fingers are stuck to the trackpad. Trello. So I'm letting Copilot give me some of these things, and it's sort of, I'm just double checking. It's kind of working out what I want it to work out, which is good. So well done, GitHub, or whoever, OpenAI, for making this stuff work like magic. Okay, take a little sip. Think about where we're at. I haven't really built anything yet. I've just moved stuff across. I've had a nice divergence to think about in both. So we've got a very, very lightweight controller at the moment. There's definitely stuff missing here, but on the surface we should pass in a key and a supervisor ID. Like I haven't changed this class at all. Should probably commit some of this stuff. What's this? X curl is missing. Let's make sure that we add it. And it's customary, I would say, to put those at the top. The language, its extensions, and then your user land packages is a nice little pattern there. Okay, fine. So now we know we've got that. Why does it not warn me about XJSON? Is that somewhere else? Maybe. I've done that just to get rid of that error, but I know that ultimately we're going to refactor all of this away. What I'm going to do at this point, I like Tower, you know, I really like it. So I'm going to go, oh, that's interesting. Why is it not there? Wow, okay. We should. Yeah. Oh, which one is it? It's this one. Right. Let's do. I'm not going to commit this. I want to commit so that I know when I'm changing things. I want to be able to see what I've done. Obviously, I can see the changes because the commit was made already for us by the Laravel installer, which is nice. But I also just want to take a snapshot of where we're at. So I'm going to, yeah, this is the one that's missing because I added this after all of that. And I don't want to change this code too much yet because I want to see how my changes develop over time. So I'm going to say add Trello client or basic Trello client. Register Trello service. And then we're going to do add pay endpoint. Fine. So just taking a moment in time to snap all of that stuff. Right, and now we should be getting somewhere. Yeah, so just what the code that Copilot gave us was just rubbish. We created the payment, but there's no such thing as payment URL. Right. So let's have a look back at what we were doing before. We don't need that anymore. This is effectively our controller. We don't need this anymore because we've got the client. So it's really just there. What were we doing here that we need to move into the other thing? So let's have a look through this in a bit more detail. We've created our client. We were creating a reference, but I don't think this was actually being passed to Trello in any way. No. So we could do something like that. There is a field for us to pass some custom data. I don't know how much data we can pass into that, whether it's going to be nice to use it for structured data. You might just want to use it for like a human readable message. That's something to investigate, but we can come to that. I think what we could do, I still like this idea of creating our own payment reference, transaction reference, or whatever you want to call it. Not there, it needs to be above the payment call. Uh, and we don't have a way to pass the nodes into this, even though it does. I'm just going to say note or not. Maybe that's acceptable. And we want string note null. And we think, yeah, also I want to kind of create this with decent type hints and things so that we've got a nice clear API for this client, and this isn't that. This is really gross. We don't know what's going to come out of this. We've got no assurances about that. It looks like it's going to be whatever the curl exec result is going to be, and that's maybe not something that useful in multiple contexts. What do we do with that when we create it? We just pass it back to the controller. So yeah, this is all a little bit too rough and ready. So we'll tidy all of that up. But let's say I want to create my own payment reference and I want to pass that in as a note. I'm just going to call it transaction ID, and then that's going to be my note. And the next thing, we get the amount from the request. So, and we format it, I'll say properly. So we should put some validation on here, because there are going to be limits to what this number should be. But to start with, we could just say that's maybe dangerous. I want a number. I want it to format the number as it comes out. That would be really nice. Let's excuse me. How did that happen? Let's just do. Whoa. And then I'm going to see what comes out. I'm going to say amount equals 10. Happy bath stuff for now. Right. So it's a string of JSON that's come back. And that is not great, honestly. So I don't want to go too far down the path of this anymore with this the way that it is, because it's going to require me to either do some work in that client class or in my controller to kind of handle this, and I want to make it something better. So at this stage, I really want to move this client to being a Saloon. I'm going to say I want it to be a Saloon client. And we can look how we can do that. But basically, so that I can do exactly what's happening here, or I can just get the piece of data that I want out of the object. I want to be able to, say to my client, do this and give me back your result, and I can do things with that. So yeah, it's a bit too early, I think, for us to start diving into some of the other stuff. So let's properly tidy this up and make it a decent thing. So let's have a look at the how do we do this in Saloon. Let's go from the top. Saloon v3. Whoa! In fact, doing that, let's take again a snapshot of where we got to. Add note to payment. I know that's going to change, but I want to capture the kind of the thinking of where we've got to. So, in fact, that can be the same. Right. So I've got Saloon. Now I have to create a connector. This is some of this stuff that we've already done is going to change quite dramatically, but the principle of it is the same. It's just going to move it around. Integration name, connector name. Integration is Trello, I think. Connector, forge connector. What does this mean? Integration name. Is this going to be the folder that it goes into? I guess. I have used Saloon as well, but it's not very much, and I can again I don't use the commands often enough to kind of remember what's going on here. It's the integration is Trello, the connector name, I'm just going to call that Trello as well. So we should have there are no commands defined in the Saloon namespace. Well, that's weird because I've just installed that, I thought. Ooh. Oops. Oh, I've only installed the base PHP package. I've skipped ahead too quickly. This is where I should read the docs, read the manual. This is what you get for being a dum-dum. It's actually quite nice that Saloon is not just a Laravel thing. I think it is a really good library. I'll probably not go too much into why I think that at the moment, just because of time. Let's do this as well. And then we've got our commands, so I can try this again. Yay. So now we should have integrations, Trello. Fine. So this is going to move away from our services, this basic service class, which is really kind of ugly, very untestable, a lot of hard-coded things going on here, which we would refactor out anyway. But the reason for going into Saloon straight off the bat is I know that it's going to make a lot of this easier long term. And as that API evolves, it's going to be better for us. And remember also, um, this is a really new API. Their documentation is very lacking, and they don't have any client libraries of their own. So we're basically having to build a client library. And I think something like Saloon gives us the rigor, kind of a framework again for us to think about those things, so we don't have to make various decisions ourselves. Like I don't need to think about what should I call this class or that class, because it's going to start to make its own sort of sense because of the way that Saloon wants to work. And I don't need to think about method names too much because, again, it's going to be like, well, Saloon wants me to do it this way. So, okay, well, let's just do it that way, which I think is quite nice. I'm hoping, having said all of this, I'm really hoping that it does GraphQL support somehow. But I'm not seeing, like I would have expected to see. So let's do a quick search and just have a look. I'm saying all that, and I don't even know. It's in GraphQL APIs. I mean, they suggest that it can in one place. It's interesting. I guess there's going to be some classes that do things a certain way to map this out. This could be interesting. I don't know too much about that space, and I don't really know if Saloon's going to do it very well. Am I just being really... Let's see. I'm not going to overthink it. Let's try and go for it, and we'll see where we get to. We're going to bump into something that's going to say, we can't do this, and that's just how it goes. Tough luck if we do. So, yeah. Right. So we've got a client, a new client, a Saloon version, and we want to set it up. So the base URL is going to be the one that we already have in our service somewhere. This one. It's going to end up looking kind of similar, is my guess. It's just going to be set up slightly differently. And the differently part is not a bad thing, because actually, if you end up using Saloon for all of your client libraries, maybe not all, but the ones that you really do need to do custom work on, then you've got consistency because they all look and behave in a similar way, which is quite nice. So that's that. Do we pass any special headers into it? No, that's the wrong. You can almost probably close that off. I don't really want to be looking at it by mistake, but let's make request. Okay, so we've got authorization and content type. I think auth is going to be handled a certain way. I'm going to assume that these are array key value, rather than what we use for curl. So that's actually nicer, in my opinion, than curl, because it's going to do that serialization for us. I'm going to say accept as well, because I want to be clear that that's what we accept on our end. And I'm going to hide that for a second because we're going to come to authentication at some point here. We'll skip to that part. So can't really make requests without it. Config is stuff that gets passed to the guzzle object. And yeah, this is what I want to be able to do. I don't want the various tokens and things stored in here. Whatever that key was in the other class needs to be, I'm going to call it key. So I want to do this, basically. And this is happening on the connector itself. So we have a constructor which accepts the key. I'm going to call it key in my case. And it's using this with token auth. And well, let's see what with token auth does because I'm not sure. Token authenticator, yeah, it's prefixing bearer, and that's not what we're doing in this case. We just dump the token straight onto with basic. It's not that. It's not digest either. I know that's going to be something else. It's not query auth. So these are okay. Default auth is no. What's this authenticator? It's not helpful. Those are, it just sets the header. So is there one of these that does nothing special? Access token. No, that's going to be a bearer. Yeah. No, so there's no really basic, like there's one for basic auth, but there's no super basic version of an authenticator. So is there a quick and easy way so that I don't have to create authentication class of my own or an authenticator? Oh, look, it's not the only way to authenticate. Another good method is using the default headers config or query on your connection request. Okay, so let's do it that way just to keep it simple. So I still want the key to come in the constructor, but I'm not going to be creating the auth there. I'm going to do it here. And that way I can control exactly what that should be. And that is exactly what it should be. And I haven't had to create some new class just to handle that special case. The fact that it's not handled by Saloon's native things. Okay, that's okay. Right. And then I've got the specific requests, so we'll come on to those in a second, and how they get created as GraphQL statements. And the other thing is this, I guess each request is, from my point of view, from this service that we're building, it should have this ID, this merchant ID set. So let's have a look at requests anyway. So then we create a request. So I'm skipping over Saloon a little bit. If you've not looked at Saloon in any detail, you should, and I will cover it very quickly now. So it's quite an abstract, I would say, library to enable you to build your own API client libraries. It could be for your own API, or it could be for a third-party API. But it does give you that sort of consistency, and it's making a lot of the decisions for you, which will make some of this easier. It might be a bit too specific for some of the choices for some kind of quirky, esoteric APIs that you might be using, so it might not fit you. But I think Sam's aim with it was to make it so that it can fit almost any case. Um, and I really like it. It's got a couple of neat tricks up its sleeve. One is it takes a very complete approach, sort of OOP methodology to creating API clients, where you differentiate connectors from requests. So each request is an object, an instance of this request object, which you attached a connector to, or you attach to a connector, whichever way you want to look at it. You basically say, with this connector, make this request. That's really quite flexible. And I think it's super powerful. And then just the thought that's gone into it, and really good documentation. And V3 was launched the other day, same time as, oh, look, there's the link to Ash Allen's new book. And yeah, you can do it that way, where you've got these multiple classes for different requests and different connectors. And I would say, if you're building any kind of client library that's more than a handful of requests, then that's probably the way that you want to go. If you're doing something very quick and dirty, you can use these solo requests, which they basically have their own connector, like a default connector that they use, and you can just chuck the whole kind of API and request definitions into one class. Convenient. It's not worse or better, it's just different. And yeah, it's a little bit quicker if you're just doing, the odd request here and there. I think if you want to build something robust, kind of go with connectors and requests. The other thing that it supports that I'm really looking forward to doing is testing. I'm looking for the little note about testing. I can't see it. Oh no, it's here. So, like, off the bat, your client library starts to become more testable straight away in a consistent fashion. So you can basically just go, well, I want to throw my connector and these requests through this sort of mock approach, which I've not used, and I've not really read through this documentation yet either. So this is going to be interesting to come to. Basically, is our client doing what we think it's going to do when it finally does go and hit that API? Can we kind of prove that to ourselves repeatedly over time? So that would be interesting. So this is Saloon, and that was a quick rundown of that. And I will get back into where we're requests. So we want to create a request. The first one is this create payment. So that at the moment, that's this method on my service class. And I want to do this the Saloon way. So I tell it where to go. Let's do this. I know that my integration name is Trello. My request is going to be create payment. Just keeping the naming the same, just for convenience, but it might change later. So we've now got this requests folder, and we've got a create payment class. It's just a get, and it's given us an endpoint, and that's it. So let's change this because we know straight away that that is going to be a post, because all of our requests were post. And the endpoint we don't need. I think we can just remove this. I've got a feeling we can just remove it because, oh no, it does need to be there. It's abstract otherwise. And it needs to return a string, so we can leave it. And then we basically want to set this up to receive the variables for that given request. And it should help us decide what to do with the response. So this is where it gets kind of interesting, because of the GraphQL element, and I was hoping for a little bit more in Saloon about GraphQL. We'll see. Because I don't like these wall of green text that I see here. This is disgusting. And this goes back to the whole debate around whether GraphQL is the right thing to even be doing. But I'm not going to, it's out of my control in this case. Like, this is the only way that I can interact with this API. So I just don't know why anyone would ever do this themselves, like sticking pencils into your pupils. And I don't mean students. Get servers, resolve endpoint. We can set some other headers on here. Yeah, config. Not really sending any parameters in this, so this is just like a basic setup of a request. And we've set one constructor argument, and that's kind of nice because we can pass it in. This is the new request that I want to do. So maybe that's kind of the thing that we should do. So we elevate these parameters to the constructor of this class. So we want amount. I do want this to be the same. In fact, I'm just going to take both of those because I want this mixed setup of amount types. I want to be able to handle all of those things and convert it into what this request expects. I want to do that here. I think that's always going to be a string, that's why that's not really needed. So I'm just going to say this amount equals that. I know whether I get a string or a float or an int come in here, I'm going to format it the way that Trello's API expects it to be. And then I'm not passing that in as like a URL part. It's not a segment of the URL. It's not a query parameter. There's the query parameters. Because we don't do that with GraphQL. We send a body. The body is, it says it's JSON. It's JSON as a wrapper, which then contains a GraphQL query string, which kind of looks like JavaScript, which is also Again, disgusting, but I can basically take the query. See, if we were doing this properly, this definition kind of reflects the definition that should be here, right? So that's kind of interesting because maybe I don't need to write all of that gross string out. Maybe I can get some meta programming going on to help me. Let's see where we end up with that. We won't do it straight away because I want to find out the edges again, but we'll do some duplication first and then we'll start to work backwards. But what I am going to do is I'm going to let that theory inform some of my decisions around naming, such as that this is a create payment, and there's keywords that I'm picking up on here that I need to be aware of that might be different, in different circumstances. So, okay, the sort of GraphQL specifics. What would be interesting there as well for me is if anybody knows of a decent sort of GraphQL serialization library for PHP, if anybody's done anything like that. I could go on a hunt. I don't really want to do that right now, but we want this to be merchant ID. Endpoint we don't need. So then it comes down to the body of the request. So we're not talking about headers, we're not talking about query parameters, we're not talking about config, we're attaching body data, and we know that it's JSON. We've said the default for all of these is JSON. So we want a JSON body. So we're going to, in our request, it says we need to implement has body. Implement has body. And then this tells us needs to implement the body method. So let's add that stub. Cool. Thank you. Body. Here's the body method. Right. JSON body. Has JSON body. Okay, that's interesting. Maybe that I don't need to implement the body method. So yeah, use as JSON body. Fine. And if I get rid of that, does it get upset? No, so this has got a body method in it. This body equals this default body. Default body is just an array. So it's going to take, if we override this default body method, protected default body, return an array, and our array, unfortunately, simply contains the string of GraphQL query language. Is that correct? No. So here's the key bit for us from the previous way we were doing this. It contains the query in a query key, and it contains the variables that are used in the query in a variables key. So it's not enough for us to just return the query like that. We need to explicitly say it's that. I'm gonna space this out more like what we're used to in this world. And then variables which we don't know what those are at the moment. We do know what they were. We'll come back to that. So this is the body now. The JSON that we're going to send is this query and the variable values that are going to be passed into that query. And the variables are just these. So we will extract these now and put them in here because we can. And I know that I need to pull. So this is, we'll talk about this in a second, but really quickly, I'm just going to take that out of there and put it in my controller. So for later. Single quote these. Single quotes are faster. I don't need to do this because I did that in the constructor, so it's just this amount. And I know that could be null. Could be an empty string, could be a bunch of things, but I can keep it simple here. I should be able to just leave it as that. And single quote, single quote. What else? It's quite tidy. Yeah, so I just need the merchant ID. That's that there. Right, so we've got the merchant ID, we've got the amount, we've got the note. They're all set as variables. We've got our query, which accepts those variables. What have we missed? Query, variables, JSON, make the request. We get the response, we JSON encode the body. We know that that's going to happen. Well, I'm assuming that that's going to happen because we said that this has a JSON body. Right, so let's just confirm that. Body method is what it uses. Body is going to equal either, if we've set body, it's going to be body somewhere else, or it's going to be a JSON body repository, which is going to take the array, an array. So what's a JSON body repository? Oh look, there we go. It just makes it a neat object-oriented way for us to do a JSON encode. Cool. So it's getting there in the end. It's just a slightly longer route to go to do that. But then that brings with it some flexibility and reduced repetition from our part, which is nice. Cool. Okay. So I'm confident that that's going to do the same thing now as what these two methods in my original service class were doing. So I can't get rid of this one yet because I'm still using it in this get payments, which we never actually used, I don't think, in the end. But we should be able to. But this one, this is dead. We can get rid of this code. We don't need this anymore. We're not going to use it. We're going to swap that for this. We're going to not use the Trello service. We're going to app HTTP integrations Trello requests. No, it's not Trello. It's not request, sorry. It's the Trello connector. So we've got, this is our Trello connector. The Trello connector, when we type in that, it's not going to do all the magic for us. We still need to tell the service container about that class. And here we are doing it with our Trello service. So we just need to swap this out as well. App HTTP integrations Trello. So now we're passing that out. We've missed something. We can see here I'm not passing in the supervisor ID. So let's go to our thingy, protected string supervisor ID. Thank you. Right, so now we've got the supervisor ID going in. How did we handle that in our original? Somewhere we passed that into the request. No? Seems not. We didn't. So why did we ever need it? That's not clear. Maybe there's some place where that will become clearer down the line. We weren't using that. Fine. I'm going to leave. Oh, I've added it because we had it. And I'm going to leave it even though we're not using it. Because it might come in later on. And I know that's maybe wrong from a certain perspective, but this is me. This is my service. I am the supervisor, so I have this ID, and undoubtedly that will come in useful somewhere down the line. So I'm going to keep that there. I'm going to keep it going in via the service provider, so we've got it ready when we need it. And so now I should be able to. Where's my controller? This one. Right. See this payment come back, but instead of this is the long way around. Instead of just this string of JSON, or what looks like JSON, now we should actually get an object, because Saloon is hopefully going to handle all of the response stuff for us. So let's see what we get. Oh, gross. Right. So it wasn't as easy to just say I can use that service and call this method anymore. That was done, really, because I knew that already. We talked about that earlier. The way that Saloon works is you create an instance of the connector and you create an instance of the request, and then you combine the two and you tell it to go and do it. So let's have a look at what the documentation actually shows us to do for that. And I think that's probably going to be in here. So we can see we knew up a request. Maybe there was a... That's not going to send it. Sending requests, look there, it's in the documentation. So this is exactly what we need to do. We need to create the connector in the right way. Well, we kind of already are doing that. This is our connector. So we can have a look to see if this is working. Is the connector what we expect a Trello connector class? Integration Trello. It's getting the things that we're passing in from the service container. So we don't need to do the passing those variables in our controller. But what we do want to do is tell it to use the request that we've created. So we need to create that request, and then we need to tell the connector to send that request. So, right, that makes sense. It's a very PSR, whatever it is, 7, maybe something else now, way of doing it. You've got your request object, you pass it to the handler sends it. That kind of composition of logic, which in this instance I think is really quite nice. You know, it's not just object call method. It's this object represents the one kind of thing that I'm handling, and then another object represents the process that's going to handle it. Right, so we want the payment to be new payment, create payment request, and get rid of that. We know that we've got to pass in a merchant ID. And we've got to pass in an amount. That's just because these things are named the same. Um, let's keep them all like this. Keep it consistent just for now. This can all be refactored out later, right? So that's quite neat. So that's got our payment. Let's see what that object looks like. It's not sent any requests yet. It's just telling us we built it up correctly. If we refresh this, we'll get a different ID. Every time we refresh, it's a different ID. That's fine. We know what our merchant ID is. We know what the amount is. The amount's up here. We can change this. Cool. That looks reasonably good. And there's some other stuff there that's obviously coming from Saloon. It's kind of what we expect. Right, so then we want to Trello send the request. Payment. It's not really, we don't want to call that payment. Well, let's just call it request. We want to send the create payment request. It's the only one that we're going to be sending here, so let's do that. And we're going to get a response. We could call that something else. This can get a little bit confusing because we've got this request and this response, and we've got, you might have a request or a form request, something up here coming in, and this response, like that you do the Laravel lifecycle request response, your application's lifecycle, and then the inner one, which is the request out to this API and its response. And yeah, just that can get a little bit, you might want to think about the names of your variables, that's all. Let's see what this response looks like. Right, no error. It came back with something. We can see it's a Saloon response, so maybe this isn't big enough. We can see more about the request, so the original data of the request. Yeah, like at least maybe not all of the original data, but some of the detail of that request. And now we've got this response object as well. So we've got some stream objects. So this is very typical of Guzzle. We've got a stream object that contains the stuff that we care about. So we need to get that out. We need to explicitly ask for that. We can't just interrogate. So we want to get JSON maybe, or body, or there's going to be something we can do on the response to get the data that's come back from that API. So let's have a look at that. Responses, interesting. Oh look, response body, response JSON. Let's have a look at the first one, response body. Okay, that's interesting. It looks kind of what I'd expected, just the text, the JSON object that we saw before, but just as a string. So we're at the same point, but we're leveled up because we can just change that code. We can just change it to JSON, and now look, we've got data, create payment. There's our payment URL. This is the bit that we want. Okay, that's cool. Now we're just dealing with an array. That's not particularly nice. I think we should move it to something else. Let's see, what can we do with the data transfer objects? Dealing with a raw response of JSON can be tedious and unpredictable. Exactly. Data transfer objects are a good solution as they allow you to define a structure for a request and a response. This is basically like, I want to create a type for this response. I know that the response should look like this, and this is how I want to handle it. So I want my DTO to handle this, right? Casting responses into DTOs. So my request can create a DTO from the response. what's server here? This is the DTO. So if you're not familiar with this concept, it's just a PHP class. Whatever language you're using, it would just be a class, a data transfer object. You're saying the properties of this this class represent just bits of data, but should be grouped together. It's like a model of sorts, but instead of it being backed by, an ORM, if you the active record or data map or something, you're not aiming to use it in that way. It sits on its own in memory on your side of this whole ecosystem, and you just want to address it and pass it around as a cohesive unit of data. It's a data transfer object, and obviously then you can apply behavior to it as well, which is the stuff that we want to be able to do. This is like OOP 101 stuff. And we've given it this DTO name, which is, I find kind of interesting. We've got to brand everything. So yeah, let me just create, what is it we're doing? We've created a payment, and I want to get this data out, and I want it to be clear what that stuff is. Like, it's a string, it's a URL, it's an amount. There's things here that we could do with some of this, which might be better for us long term. So I am going to just copy and paste some of this. Firstly, in your request, or connector. Or connector. I think I'd probably want this in the request because the responses are going to be specific to the request. So request, response, DTO for that response. Create DTO from response. You get access to the response object containing the response to cast into a data transfer object from response method, so I can write all the logic. Yeah, so I'm going to take that example and we're going to adapt it. So we're going to go back into our request. I'm going to paste this in. We're going to say, what's the response? That's a Saloon response. So we should be able to pull that in. Import Saloon response. And it's not a server data transfer object. There's no suggestion about where this should go, by the way. All right, so I'm going to create a folder called data. It's interesting. Maybe this wasn't exactly how Fred did it, but in his talk at Laracon US, when he was talking about the Sparty package Laravel data, I think this is kind of how he approached it, putting it in a data folder. Maybe this is enough. So we're going to call this a payment. Is it a payment? I don't know. Like, this is where we're also dependent on kind of the way that this third party is thinking about this thing. Like, do we want to try and encapsulate things in a similar way to what they're doing? This response could be seen as a payment. It's not strictly the payment. It's a request to pay. This is I want to pay £1,000. It is in this case, and it's given us the way to do that, and it's given us the payment ID. So we could call it a payment. I think it's simple enough to call it a payment. So let's say this is a payment. So it's a payment data transfer object. It doesn't need to extend anything. It's not doing anything special, right? But what we want to do is then just set it up to accept the values that we expect. So we do have an ID. What else do we have? We have an amount. Fine. We have a payment QR source, so we're going to take that. And predictably, a payment URL. So we're going to take that. And then what does Sam suggest here? So he's just created this factory method that will take the Saloon response and turn it into an instance of this class. So you can see this is a static method. And it's going to return a new self, new static. And it's intentionally breaking out the bits from the response and passing them in as the constructor parameters for this data transfer object. It's really simple. It's a really nice pattern. I think let's just swipe this logic. We're going to import this again. We know that that's a response type. It's not, again, type hinting all of these things is really useful. I like the fact that PHP is flexible about this and we don't have to do it unless we force ourselves to. But doing it gives us assurances when this code runs, we're dealing with the right object. So when you can, you should try to do it. It's going to make your life easier long term, I would say. So our data is the response JSON. So our JSON looks like this at the moment. Data, create payment, blah, blah, blah. So what I'm not clear on here is if it's going to look exactly like that in our, once we've got to this point. I guess it is, right? Because this is the same response class that's going to be sent through to our controller once this has executed, it's been sent, that request has been sent. So let's assume that it's the same one, which means that this structure that we see here is exactly what we're going to get in our DTO. I'm going to import a payment DTO from response method, and it's going to be data, create payment. How did it know? Honestly, that's just magic. And then, so this is actually a little bit worrisome, I guess, because it might not exist. Does this accept? Oh, that's interesting. Does it accept dot notation? Array helpers get, and this does accept dot notation. Thank you, Saloon. This is beautiful. So now I don't need to do it this way, which this is brittle doing it this way. Why? Because if this response doesn't contain data or doesn't contain this create payment key within this array, this will break, and I don't like that. But if I can do this, and I know that under the hood, that's using the array helpers, the dot notation getter, we can look at this. It's going to fall back to null values and then let me set a default, which is kind of pre-existing behavior that Laravel, the array helpers in Laravel have provided for a very long time, which is what I'm expecting and why I came looking for it, because I know that it's there. So let's see. We might not see this case where the payment was failed to be created, and I don't know if we can forcibly test that against the API directly, but we could create a test case, which we should do, to see what happens when this is empty, because we should be able to set a default here Yeah. So if there's no payment gets created here, then I want to be able to do something. I don't want to create a DTO that doesn't represent the data that I expect. I want it to be something else. Anyway, that's fine. Now, because these names are all the same, ID, amount, payment QR, source, payment URL, that name, if this API is any kind of sensible, what we might end up with is that this from response can be generalized into all of our requests. So there's not one specific for payment, because what we can do here, instead of explicitly passing all of those, we can just go data. And we'll see how that looks in a minute. So then the bit that we want to test here is what happens when we come back to our controller. So instead of just getting the body or the JSON, we now want DTO. And it looks as though create a DTO, even if the response was a failure, create a DTO or throw an exception if the response was not successful. That's interesting. I'm not sure how that plays out in reality for us at the moment. So we're just going to use DTO. So we send the request, and instead of just interrogating this JSON array, we're going to see, hopefully, our payment DTO object filled up with these parameters, but not nested in this wacky array. Int string given. Yes, well, that's correct. That is absolutely correct, and I should have spotted that beforehand. So that's right, it can't be an int, that's just bad, because that ID was a UUID, so that's always going to be a string. That's just silly copy-paste error. Woo! Okay, here we go. We've got our ID, confirm the amount, the URLs are separate things, and now I've got this object where I can interrogate these things directly. So in our payment controller, now I can just do, I am going to call this payment because I now know, oh no, it's not that, sorry, what am I doing? I don't want to get rid of that. It's this that I want to call payment. This is our payment object. We know that this is going to be our payment DTO. So I can say payment, payment URL. I'm keeping it like simple. The naming's the same, even though the word payment here is redundant, because the consistency across the interfaces is more important than the redundant code or the redundant typing here that I might be doing a lot of. It's not actually a lot of typing, because once I've got a payment object, and I know that my payment object is a payment object, which I don't here, unfortunately, because it's too abstract and it's not going to know, but I can say it's a payment object. I know that I've got a payment URL, so it's not much typing at all. I mean, obviously, Copilot's going to do most of the work for me. But even if without Copilot, maybe it will. No, for some reason, the ID is not going to let me see the other options. Whatever. Well, thanks for showing me up, PHP Storm. Anyway, Um, that's an interesting different error. Oh, because I've, wait, what? Subject must be of type string. Excuse me, did I not leave that in? Okay, I didn't do anything. And there we go, it's redirected. So it's made the API call, we get the URL back, and we can redirect the URL. And we could do some things here. Once we know this is actually a read only. PHP 8.2? I'm on PHP 8.2. Why are you not on PHP 8.2? Oh, well, let's make it. I know that I can use this. So thank you very much. And the reason for using read-only here is because with a DTO that's representing data coming from a third-party API, any changes I make to this, they're only going to be on my side of the equation, my application side, in memory somewhere in the request lifecycle for whoever's using this. That is not something, I don't want that to be mutable, basically. I don't want people to be able to change that data because it's not going to be persisted or anything yet. So I just want to make that clear up front that this is intended to be read-only. Obviously, this is my application code and this isn't a shared library or anything like that. So there's no other consideration at this stage. I can just say, with confidence right now, I feel like it should be immutable. And if it changes, I can change this, and that's not going to be too bad. But what you do, I guess, if you likened a DTO to a model that's backed by a database or something, and an ORM that's going to link all of that stuff together, your expectation might be that there's some way that you're going to be able to save this, and so I can make modifications and I should be able to do something, and it's going to make something happen somewhere else that's going to persist the changes that I'm making, and that's not the case. So just kind of declaring that up front, that that's not possible yet with something like this until we do more. Anyway, right, so we've got our payment DTO, we're getting it, and we get to this point where we saw before. I think this is a good place. It would be nice to get to doing some testing of our requests and see if the API client can handle different scenarios. Maybe we do that next time. Now that we've got that all working, it's a kind of first pass, all piped together. Let's just go back and re-request this and make sure that my read-only hasn't broken anything. This is why we need tests, so I don't have to do that. And then, what else do we want to do? So we've got the makings of a decent API client for Trello now. We've got some good things starting to happen. We've got to improve this controller. So this is not in the right shape still. I don't want these hard-coded values in here. I need to add some validation around some of this stuff. So we've got some work to do there. And we did talk about we were going to do data model and think about the data that we want to capture. And if we just jump back to the really old version of this as a quick comparison, we've gone from this very ugly, it's not bad actually, this is fine. But when you think about the layers of problems that could arise here and the stuff that we've now cut out because we're using the framework and taken, oh well, a couple of hours, not even a couple of hours, to turn that into something really tidy. Um, we've ended up with a much better solution, and it's already more powerful, less error prone, and more flexible. So that's nice. But here we were already thinking about starting to capture some data, and we should be thinking about doing that again. So we should be testing and data model are probably the key things that I want to move on to next before we start going down any other roads. Yeah, so that's that. Cool. Okay, we can stop that for now. Right, I'm going to pause there. Well, not just pause, I'm going to stop. Right, we're going to go back to this. If you managed to stick around for 2 hours watching me go through all of that and you were following along and it made any kind of sense, thank you. If it didn't, please leave comments and tell me where I could be improving this. It's yeah, it's not easy kind of talking to myself and having no feedback, so I don't really know whether it's appropriate or not. And if I'm skipping over things that I should try and explain, it would be nice to see a few more people here joining in. But I know that Friday afternoon, maybe everybody wants to go off and have a weekend. At least it's Friday afternoon for me. Maybe it's just kicking off in the morning and everybody's super busy everywhere else. But yeah, let's see. I think that was a good exercise of moving that really imperative code into a more structured Laravel way of doing it. You know, we went through that quite rapidly, I feel, and it's got to the same place that we were at, which might seem redundant, but now it's in this place where we can test it and all of those lovely things that we want to be able to do, which I'm really excited about because that means it's starting to feel like a proper application. Like I could safely start to think about actually getting other people on board and using, which is exciting. Okay, enough of that. Let's think about what have I got here. The final bit that I wanted to cover really was what this product should end up being. So we've proven that we can take real payments that have no fees, basically, and send them directly and very, very quickly. They're just one-off payments. There's no like recurring model to it yet, at least within the APIs that I've got available at the moment. So there's some avenues that I can kind of dig down and investigate with the Trello team and see what they might be able to provide that expands upon that functionality. But even with what we've got something really interesting. And I think there are potential use cases there that could be fun. We're a bit limited. The audience is probably going to be UK only at the moment because everything within their API is just focused on pounds and they're sort of very UK focused as a product and a service provider, which is limiting. I appreciate that. But if there's anybody sort of in the UK that wants to give this a go, I'd be keen to hear from you about what you think you could use this for, what would make use to you, would be valuable. And I'd like to maybe try and solve some of those problems. Like I think there's a few things off the top of my head that this could go into, which I would like to explore. I think I'll leave an open question on the channel and see if we get any responses, and ask on Twitter and things as well, just to see if anybody's got any specific things that they'd like to go in. Or maybe the alternative is that now we've got to this place, this isn't worth pursuing on live stream and everybody's a bit bored of payments and it's just all a bit sad. So if that's true, say that too. Tell me that it's you're not excited by this at all, that's okay. I still am, but I get it if it's not what you're into. Um, that doesn't mean I'm going to change, by the way. That just means that I'm going to be upfront about whether or not this is something that I continue doing, and you can then decide uh, whether you stick around to watch. Um, I I'm going to wrap up what I've done as a commits. That feels like the right thing to do. And then I'm going to call it a day. I think I'm going to go and jump in the pool. So, yeah, have a great weekend if you're watching this on Friday. If you're watching this on another day, well, I hope you had a great weekend. Peace.